A hearth in the Utah desert, 12,000 years ago. Someone is roasting ducks over the fire, and scattered in the ash are 4 tiny black seeds from a plant nobody eats. You probably assume smoking begins with tobacco, and tobacco begins with Columbus. That is off by roughly 11,000 years. Over the next few minutes, you will meet the oldest clue anyone has found, a pipe that still had nicotine trapped inside it, a set of mummies that broke the timeline and then unbroke it, and the reason your own body was ready for smoke long before anyone chose to inhale it. The question sounds simple. It is not. To answer when people started smoking, you first have to decide what counts as smoking. Burning a plant is not smoking. Sitting in the smoke of a fire is not smoking. Smoking is deliberately pulling smoke into your body because of what it does to you. Archaeology is very good at finding objects. It is very bad at finding intentions. Start with the strongest evidence anyone has and work backwards. Northern Alabama on the Flint River. A broken stone pipe from a settlement dated to roughly 1600 BCE. Pipes turn up all over the ancient world, and on their own, they prove little. A tube is a tube. You can argue for decades about what went through it. This one settled the argument. Researchers scraped the residue out of the bowl and found nicotine still sitting there, 3,500 years later. That is the difference between a guess and a fact. The pipe tells you someone made a tube. The nicotine tells you what they burned in it. So, 3,300 years. That is a real answer, and for a long time it was the answer. Then, a team in the Great Salt Lake Desert opened a hearth in the mudflats at a place called the Wishbone Site. Around the fire lay the bones of ducks and stone tools and the leftovers of a meal eaten at the edge of a wetland that no longer exists. In the ash were 4 charred seeds of wild tobacco. That hearth is about 12,300 years old. Nobody eats wild tobacco. It is bitter, it is tiny, and it feeds nobody. If it is in your fire, it is in your fire on purpose. One hearth pushed human tobacco use back by roughly 9,000 years into the last centuries of the Ice Age, thousands of years before anybody farmed anything. Be careful here, because this is where the story has to be honest. Burnt seeds prove the plant was present and being handled. They do not prove a pipe, and they do not prove lungs. Those people may well have chewed the leaves into wads and tucked them into a cheek, which is how tobacco was used across much of the Americas for a very long time. So they had the plant, they had the fire. That still is not smoking, and to find smoking, we have to leave the Americas completely. High in the Pamir Mountains of western China, at nearly 3,000 meters, there is a cemetery called Zhizangkal. The graves are around 2,500 years old. Inside several of them, archaeologists found wooden braziers holding round stones, burnt black. Someone had heated those stones, then laid plant material on top of them, indoors, around a body. The chemistry is what makes this the turning point. Residue from the braziers carried the signature of cannabis, and not the mild fiber plant grown across Asia for rope. This was unusually high in the compound that alters the mind. Somebody had selected it. Somebody had noticed that plants differ and gone looking for the stronger one. At almost the same time, and 2,000 kilometers to the west, the Greek writer Herodotus described the Scythians doing something nearly identical. Hemp thrown onto hot stones inside a sealed tent, and the men inside howling with pleasure. For a long time, that was filed away as a traveler's tall tale. Then frozen tombs in the Altai gave up small braziers and hemp seeds, and the tall tale started reading like a field report. That is your first solid moment of humans breathing smoke on purpose, for effect, with equipment built to do it properly. Now, the reversal. In the early 1990s, a German toxicologist tested tissue from Egyptian mummies and reported finding nicotine and cocaine. Both plants grow only in the Americas. If the result held, the entire map of the ancient world was wrong. It did not hold. Nicotine is a stubborn contaminant. It was used as an insecticide in museum collections. It clings to handling. It drifts through storerooms. The cocaine was never convincingly reproduced. What looked like a rewritten timeline turned into a lesson about evidence instead. That lesson matters for everything you have just heard. Residue is powerful, and residue is fragile. A date is only ever as good as the dirt it came out of. Now go much further back than any pipe. At Kesem Cave in Israel, there is a hearth used over and over in the same spot, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Shelters were small. Ventilation was theoretical. Generation after generation slept, ate, worked, and died inside a permanent haze of wood smoke, and their bodies adjusted. Modern humans carry a version of a receptor that handles the toxic compounds in smoke, and it reacts far more calmly to them than the version Neanderthals carried. Our tolerance for burning plant matter is not a habit we picked up, it is inherited equipment, which quietly rewrites the question. Nobody had to teach our species to breathe smoke. We were already doing it, every night, for hundreds of thousands of years. Smoking was never an invention, it was a narrowing. From breathing whatever the fire happened to give you, to choosing exactly which plant went on it. The rest happens quickly. In 1492, men off Columbus's ships watched people in Cuba roll dried leaves, light one end, and draw the smoke in. One of them carried the habit home to Spain, where it thoroughly unsettled the neighbors. Within a century, tobacco was growing in Africa, India, China, and Japan. But the thing you actually picture when you hear the word smoking is younger than all of that. It arrives in the 1880s, when a machine built by James Bonsack began rolling cigarettes at over 200 a minute. A skilled worker could roll about 4. Cheap, identical, disposable smoke for everyone. 12,000 years of the plant, 140 years of the machine. So when did ancient humans start smoking? The plant was in the fire at least 12,300 years ago. The equipment for deliberate inhalation is unmistakable by 2,500 years ago, and everything the word means to you today is barely older than photography. The deeper answer is stranger than any of those dates. Go back to that hearth in the desert. The ducks, the ash, the 4 black seeds. Those people were already inhaling smoke constantly, without a word for it and without a choice in it. The fire was never the new part. Ancient humans did not start smoking. They started choosing what to breathe.